Konstantinos Roditis.
Konstantinos Roditis.
Sounds Greek to me.
That is
Very Greek.
It is a very Greek name. So I'm
It's all
running.
Greek to me. Okay, go
I'm
ahead.
running for California State Controller, so I've been on this tour with Mark since August 1st. We're usually right in together and right out, but we've been doing a little tag team today because media interviews. He started one, and then I had to finish one, and then we've been kind of jumping back and forth. So, and plus the Santa Cruz ride does not seem too appealing right now. We've been putting on a lot of miles, but he's going to be doing that leg on his own. But thanks for coming out to see us. Now, a lot of people are not kind of sure who the controller is, what the controller kind of does, what the responsibilities are. So that's usually a lot of the times people ask me, they're like, what the heck's a controller and what's the difference between a controller and a treasurer? You guys are both money people, but I don't know what the heck you guys do. So in a very simplified way, if you want to think about the treasurer, when money's going into tax dollars into the state coffers, that's the treasurer. So they deal with, the credit rating, they deal with the issuance of bonds, and there's a lot of overlap. They're on the pension boards of CalPERS, CalSTRS with me as well. But the specific duties, the differences then between the treasurer and the controller is the controller when money's coming out of the state treasury, right? The person who signs the checks is the controller. And so because of that, really the taxpayer watchdog is not the treasurer, it's the controller. Because when money's being spent, it's a controller's duty to make sure that there's no waste, fraud, and abuse happening. And because of that, they have this beautiful thing called the Independent Audit Authority. And so, unfortunately, our current controller doesn't really like to use it. Likes to, kind of turn a blind eye to things like the high-speed rail, which would be a great example of a project that should be audited by, well, I will kill it, but that should be audited by the controller's office. But they have refused to do so. Now, the great thing about the Independent Audit Authority is it doesn't necessarily just mean a state project or a state government agency. It's anything that deals with state funds has the ability to be audited by the controller. So if you guys remember the city of Bell, remember that whole scandal and everything happened? Well, that's a city. But they use state funding, so therefore the controller did come in there and start taking a look once the scandal started breaking and then do the investigation. So it's from the state, county, to the city level. It's programs or government agencies that using state funds. So it's really important to have a controller who's actually going to actually protect the taxpayers. So that's why they have the Independent Audit Authority. But another great power that the office has is the ability to actually hold payments. A lot of people don't know that. So the controller can take a look and say, well, we have some waste, fraud, and abuse going on here, or this does not comply with the state law. So because it doesn't comply with state law, I'm gonna hold funding on it until it comes into compliance. And there's a great program that you just mentioned, my friend. It's the high-speed rail. So if we look at the high-speed rail, there's two aspects of it. One, it should have been audited. When you look at it and say, well, we're promised, 800 miles worth of track, and now they're talking about 520. They're talking about up to 220 miles an hour. Now in large stretches, we have going up to 110 miles an hour. So a third of the track is going to have speed restrictions and using old lines that are not high speed. The project was supposed to be completed in 2020. Now they're saying 2033, which I still don't think, even if they continue on this, it's going to be done in 2033.
Maybe 2050 if we're lucky.
They see bridges go up, they're taking them down. You see the total cost was supposed to be about 35 to 45 billion, somewhere within that aspect. Now, $100 billion. The ticket was supposed to be about 2.5 hours from San Francisco to, up to 2.5 hours from San Francisco to LA. $50 ticket. Now they're like, well, we can maybe do it in about 3.5 hours. And yes, we know a regular train would probably do it in about 4, a little over 4. And no, by the way, if you want to ride it, we're projecting it's going to cost $186 for the ticket.
You can fly round trip on Southwest for less than that.
Yep, you can fly midweek from LA to San Francisco for under $50.
Yeah.
And so when you look at those, you're like, wow, I mean, there's nothing in there that pops up to me that says this deserves an audit. I mean, really, that's what they're saying, because they're not taking a look at it from the controller's office.
That's because it's other people's money.
It's other
not
people's
theirs.
money. But
It's our money.
within that whole project, if you guys remember, what the authorizing agent was for the high-speed rail, it was Prop 1A back in 2008. So besides them selling us this grandiose project that was never going to happen, they also put a thing in there that is very helpful for me as your next controller, because the taxpayers were sold on the idea that we're not going to pay for all of this. So we're not paying for even, let's say if it did cost $100 billion they projected, which it wasn't, we don't even have to pay. We only have to pay a third of it. Right? Before it was around $35 billion. We only have to pay a third. It's fantastic. 1/3 is going to be the federal government, and 1/3 is going to be private sector. And that's going to be the funding requirements of the project. Well, the federal government has stopped paying for it, and the private sector has never given one penny, because the private sector is smart enough not to invest in $1 billion in something that will not even help with our traffic congestion problems. So when I look at that and I say, well, if that's the funding parameters and that's the authorizing agent, and as the power controller, if something doesn't comply with state law, I have the wonderful and awesome duty of holding payments until it complies with Prop 1A. So that's why on day one as controller, I'll get to defund the high-speed rail until it complies with Prop 1A, which it will never will, and the project is going to be finally dead. So that's what I look forward to doing the first day. It'll be great. I can say I saved you $100 billion. And you know, the real power also of the controller's office as the chief financial officer of the state is the bully pulpit. And that's what's really important, is to really use the office to put pressure on the legislature, and then hopefully we'll have John Cox as our governor, but if not, to make sure that, you know, Gavin Newsom doesn't go completely crazy on us, which unfortunately he really wants to do. So it'd be my
Well,
so
we're
it'd be
going
my
to keep
duty
him from getting it.
is to basically, you know, confront them. So when we have the current controller, for instance, we had the SB1 gas increase, the gas and car tax. Now they kept on telling us that there was not enough money. And on the outside, if you don't look at the numbers, it kind of seems reasonable. If I told you we haven't increased the car tax, the gas tax in 25 years, and it's a set fee, don't we need to increase it? Well, you'll be like, well, yeah, 25 years, that kind of makes sense. You know, that's a long time, and it's a set fee. It makes sense that but when then you look at the numbers and say, well, we have millions of more cars. You have 20% of the gas tax only goes towards road repairs. When Texas spends $1, we spend $4 for an equivalent mile of road to fix. Other states is even more, up to like 4.7%. 4.7 times more we'll pay than other states. They have better roads and cheaper roads. Why? And it gets done faster. Well, they outsource a lot of their work. Most states do about 50% of outsourcing. Arizona and Florida, they do about 80%. We do a whopping 10%.
That's because we got a bureaucracy called
And we got a
Caltrans.
bureaucracy. And now with all those employees, you must think, well, we don't outsource everything. They're working hard. They're doing everything. Nope. We still have thousands of employees that we don't need. And the state government has basically said we have approximately 3,500 state employees in Caltrans that we don't absolutely need. There's no need for them whatsoever. We cannot use them, and it costs at least $500 million a year to keep them on there. So luckily we only have 54% of them that are at or near retirement. We just put a hiring freeze, and when they retire, we don't have to fill those spots, and we can save hundreds of millions of dollars. But now we continue on the policy of just hiring more people. And so that's why you need a controller to go ahead and put pressure on them and expose this when they try to do a tax increase. Now, eventually, sometimes they're going to do something stupid, and that's why we have the ability of propositions like we have for Yes on 6, which is a repeal of the car and gas tax. And I tell people, it's not necessarily the $779.28 the average family of 4 will pay the first year, because that's really the first year. Because here's the two worst things about the car and gas tax increase. One, it's not a one-time deal. Everybody kind of thinks that this happened once and that's it. Like maybe it will come back to us in 5 years or 10 years and say we need an increase. No, they automatically put in a tax increase every year based on the consumer price index. So in July 2019, guess what? you're going to get another tax increase. In 2020, tax increase. 21, every single year, there's going to be a tax increase. So there is no debate between the politicians and bureaucrats in Sacramento and the taxpayer. There's no accountability, right? Right now they just basically said, we've wasted your money, we've wasted billions of dollars, and we think it's acceptable and fine to increase your taxes, and we don't even want to have this discussion anymore because we really don't care about you because we're the ruling class. Really, they're basically saying is, God, we wish we didn't have to have elections. Really, that's all they're basically saying with this. The people are a nuisance to us. You guys are like cockroaches, and it's annoying that we actually have to deal with this. We should just basically take your money and do whatever, and eventually, if we don't like you, I mean, they might even open gulags. You never know with these people. They're so crazy that they don't even want to represent you anymore. They just want to take your money, and they don't want to be held account. And that's why I tell people, I'm like, even if you are the most far left person and you think we need more money for absolutely everything and we need the carbon tax, if you vote no on Prop 6, you're basically saying it's okay for government to steal your money and waste it, and we're just going to give them more money. Absolutely not. There first needs to be accountability. If there's no accountability, then you're just saying, just hand them over your paycheck already and do nothing about it. So it's important that we keep the feet to the fire for the people who represent us. That's our duty as citizens, is to do that one. So as the controller, I'll get to use that bully pulpit and scream at the top of my lungs to make sure that information, because we don't have anybody on our side it's up there. The controller is the check and balance. It's the true check and balance on the legislator and on the governor to make sure that things are being done correctly.
How much fraud and abuse do you think is in the current state budget?
Oh, it would be billions of dollars. I mean, it doesn't take very much.
Just a guesstimate of the percentage, because it's huge.
How much waste?
How much waste and fraud in the current state budget?
Well, yeah, you can't really look. I mean, with fraud, when you're dealing with fraud or you're dealing with just numbers that make no sense, it's just like our pensions, right? People are like, well, I see something where it says we have about $200 billion in unfunded liabilities in CalPERS. It's a complete lie. Absolute complete lie. I mean, if you're right, it's when they did a projection, for instance, on the high-speed rail, have you guys ever noticed that even with Obamacare, like, the government comes back and it says, it's going to cost this much, and then it costs 10 times more? Yeah. It's a scam. You know why no one in the private sector ever put in money? Because we actually understand financing, and we're going to run the numbers that make sense and are based on reality. They're literally told, you're going to use these parameters and you're going to give us these numbers. So they cook the books already to tell you what the amount's going to be. They do it all the time. So when you have a discount rate or rate of return on CalPERS and you say, we're doing 7.5%, they're like, well, you're not even close to that. We can do it. And then they're like, well, we'll lower it down to 7% by 2024, 2025, and that's going to be our rate of return. And what does the current controller say? Well, we can do that. And then the outside consultants are saying, look, no, you can't do that. We're probably maybe looking at 6.2%, and they're being nice at 6.2%. It's like, no, I'm going to ignore all those professional people, and we don't have that problem. Stanford did their own study, and we're kind of looking at it, and they're like, well, really long term, you're probably looking at, with recessions and everything else, 5.5% rate of return. So remember around that $200-some billion of unfunded pension liability? Mm-hmm. Well, if we take Stanford's numbers, it's $900 billion. Yeah. See, and that's how you go ahead and change it, right? They do the amortization costs. They moved it from some areas from 30 to 20 years, which is good. You're going to pay it off quick. And not necessarily they're really paying the 20-year rate, but they're kind of projecting the numbers. Well, that also lowers the unfunded liability. So really, to understand it, you have to crunch down into the numbers is the base, because when you're doing your actuarial calculations, say for for the pension, you have to know exactly what parameters, how long people are living, which category and groups, rate of inflation, basically on medical, on consumer price, what you're projecting. So it's not an exact science. So most of the numbers on our debts and everything else, they don't want to highlight, because obviously if they really went to the real projections, besides the fact The employees would have to pay more out of their paycheck. You would instantaneously see cities and counties go bankrupt. I mean, they're already going to come some in the next 4 years. There's going to be a lot of cities that are going to go bankrupt because they can't afford the pension scheme. So there's just, I mean, it's crazy. You know, we've increased our budget 60% over the last 8 years, and they want more taxes, and that's the fundamental problem. That they want more taxes. So like SB1 wasn't enough for them. The current controller, you know, her her second term, you know, she's basically said her priority is comprehensive tax reform in California. Sounds nice, but if you actually look at her comprehensive tax reform plan, it's just more taxes. So it's looking at things just going, we have this huge section of the economy here that we have not taxed. How can we get that money, because we need that money? And so they came up with a scheme that we've been talking about, and it's her dream is to create a service and labor tax. So if you guys don't know what a service and labor tax is, it's a really nice tax that basically taxes absolutely everything. So, for instance, in a quick explanation, you know, you have a vehicle, a car, and you take it in to get the brakes done, right? Currently, you only pay sales tax
On the
brakes, not on the labor. Well, they go, why isn't that labor tax? That's an important part of aspect that we need to get. So they're looking at that, but they're looking at more than just things like your vehicle or a haircut, or ladies, when you want to get your nails done or something like that. They're looking at all services, so things like healthcare. So you want to go visit your doctor, you're going to get a tax on your doctor. How about healthcare? How many working parents or single mothers do you know out there that are barely struggling to get by in California? Let's go ahead and put tax on that. Transportation, yes, babysitters would be included. That's childcare, that falls right into it. You're going to have information technologies, warehousing, transportation, whole sections of the economy. It's architects. I mean, you want to talk about affordable housing? How much is going to be for architects, construction workers, and so forth. So we're talking about, you know, not a small, you know, piece of the economy of affecting. So they did their study, and her report came out that if we taxed everything at the sales tax rate on labor, we'd increase it $120 billion at least a year in new taxes. Take that into comparison and see the effect that 5.4 billion SB1 had per year. Imagine what that will do. Now they're probably going to say, well, no. Konstantinos Roditis, you're crazy. Well, even though we put that in our report.
Can I ask you a question?
Give me 1 second. Let me finish up real quick. You know, you're crazy. You know, we just want to go ahead and implement it, you know, a small percentage at first, and then we want to increase it.
Yeah.
I mean, really, that's it. Because when you take a look at our income tax, our gas tax, and sales tax, guess what we like to be? We like to be the highest in the nation. So how long do you think it's going to be until that service and labor tax goes sky high? And it will go fundamentally because of our the new tax code from the federal government. So on the federal government side, right, we have which is kind of known as the Trump tax plan. Now, it's really good for most Californians. By far, very good for everyday people. Puts more money into our pockets. It's great. It's spurred on the economy, and we are seeing a lot of growth. The problem is not for regular everyday people. It's for the millionaires and billionaires that live in high tax states. Because before, you had 100% state and local tax deduction. So even though the top marginal tax rate is 13.3% here in California, the capital gains tax top marginal is 23.8%. So if you're paying so much money to California and you owe to the federal government, well, you got to deduct what you paid to California and not pay the federal government. So they were insulated. Now, high taxes and high regulations increase the, the cost of living and everything else, but that's minute for, millionaires and billionaires. It really affects the middle class. But they can afford to live here and they want to live in California. Who doesn't? So what have we been seeing? Before, we were seeing a lot of middle class people leaving the state because they couldn't afford. You didn't hear moving trucks for the millionaires and billionaires. Well, now you are. because reports are already coming out that millionaires are leaving the state. And why is it fundamentally a problem? Well, 70,000 people make up 48% of the general fund here in California. 15,000 people make up 25%. That's why when you see the stock market there, like Jerry Brown is like, yeah, I'm fiscal conservative. I got $9 billion in surplus. It's like, bro, the stock market's been doing great for 10 years and you've increased the budget 60% over 8 years. Has nothing to do with your policies. You were insulated by the previous tax code. Now we're going to be seeing problems. If they start leaving, especially if the stock market goes down, what's going to happen? What does Gavin Newsom already said? I want to tax you more. I want to give out stipends to people. I want to turn it into crazy town here. Well, that costs a lot of money. And where are they going to go? The service and labor tax. So it's coming. So that's why I tell people, we need to step up and we need to start telling people this is going to be happening because it's going to add thousands of dollars onto everyday families. And that's why we need to get out the message and tell people if we're working to make California affordable and livable here, we need better policies. And we need a controller who's going to protect the taxpayers. So that's why I'm running for California State Controller. And my name is so complex, Konstantinos Roditis, and you guys have difficulties. I'll only answer once I'm done my little spiel. You can't go to my website because you can't spell my name. Well, I made it really easy for you. My website is cacontroller.com because I'm running for California State Controller. So that's cacontroller.com. And at this time, I'll go ahead and ask your questions or any questions you guys may have.